On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
Let's get into it then, man. Let's talk
Yeah.
NBA, talk MLB. We're going to
Yeah.
talk schedule, training, needs, all of that. But just kind of start with, what does your day-to-day look like in season, baseball
Right.
versus basketball, and then we can branch out from there.
Yeah, so like in season with Major League Baseball, obviously the day starts a little later and it kind of runs into the evening. Like it's just like as soon as you start, you don't stop until the end of the game. NBA is it's more undulating in where you're like you go in for shoot around, right? So you have like a morning swing, then you have a gap, and then you go back for the evening through game time. Um, so it's kind of broken up, in a sense of you kind of start, stop, and then start up again. Whereas baseball is more consistent in terms of like as soon as the day starts, you're going until the game is over. So typically what we would do in a baseball lens is, we'd have our meetings, go from meetings straight to the weight room. Guys come in, do their prep work, and then it's like it's go time, right? It's lift, get ready for the game. NBA, it's kind of a mixed bag. You get some guys. So basically, you're trying to organize your day based on shooting times, pregame, understanding certain individuals. Do they like to do things pre? Do they like to do things post? Or if there's a guy like under a rehab protocol, do we take care of those guys? Right after shoot around or sometime, prior to shoot around. So it's a little bit more logistical and trying to create the framework to execute, and be effective and efficient. Um, so yeah, it's really just kind of like this undulating, kind of like juggling and just trying to make sure that, things are organized and set in place to execute at a high level throughout the day because you are going to do that, gas break, back to the gas, to get ready for game time. So yeah, that's pretty much the logistics there in a nutshell.
If the game's at 7, what time is shoot around? What time is pregame? And then what do you do in that gap?
Yeah, so for me, like a 7 o'clock game, the shoot around will probably end around like 11:30. So for me, I have an hour and a half commute, so I try to get out and maybe spend an hour, 2 hours with the family, just trying to really soak up the family time because that's probably going to be the only time I see them awake. And then get back to the arena, right around like that 4 o'clock, 4:30 marker. Guys shoot around starts around 5 o'clock. So, and it's just like 20-minute windows of guys just kind of like pumping through the weight room, intermittently taking care of their prep and activation and then hitting the court. So yeah,
How aggressive is that shoot around in the morning? Is it like, in baseball you do early work and
right.
guys can get pretty aggressive with it, or is it just kind of get the ball, get some feel, get some shots up, and then just get out of there?
It really just depends on the schedule. Like if you're going through like a daunting schedule, sometimes it's kept very light where guys just look at film and kind of go over the gameplay sequence and how they're going to attack, defensively and offensively. But then there's also some times where, if we've come off an off day, it's more ramped up, it's more energetic. It's just more energy. So you'll have film review, guys will stretch, guys will do walkthroughs, and then the intensity of the practice kind of depending on where we are in the schedule, what we've done the day before. Like, are we coming off back to back? Like typically we come off back to backs. Guys aren't doing a whole lot outside of the rest and recovery just to be prepared for the game. But if it's just kind of like those undulating where it's like game, couple they've had a couple days to get their feet underneath them, we'll try to give them that dose of, high energy, explosive, just a little bit more robust practice so that they're ready for the game.
When I was with Boston, we had a series in Tampa, and we had a local hitting facility, and the guys went to hit at like 10 or 11 a.m. Went
Yeah.
back to the hotel, took a break. We took a late bus to the field and then played the game. And it was so out of the culture of baseball that it was like on ESPN, they were like making headlines about like, oh, are the Red Sox doing something weird? Is it what is going on here?
Yeah.
So all of this is to say that I'm curious, has it ever been brought up in basketball that you just show up later and do everything and get rid of the gap? Or is that so like anti what the culture of the game is that it would never happen?
I think both. Like I think it's kind of like, it's just some of the like natural ways people have done things over the course of time. So we
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like do it because it's just always been done that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it's a little bit of that. There has been some question, like when I was at the combine this past year, a lot of strength coaches like they asked me about the baseball situation and scheduling, and it was like once I told them, it was like as soon as we start, it's go, it's all the way through, and they were like, some people were like, yeah, I think that would probably work a lot nicer, just kind of getting guys going and then just let them roll into through the game. So I think there's some people out there kind of speculating if that's something that could happen or what that looks like. I'd be interested to hear if anybody in the NBA, tries to do that and what that looks like and kind of the players' response. Because I think a lot of it too is, people are trying because basketball is so violent on court. There's a lot of ASO, a lot of DSO, a lot of change of directions happening at a very high level. I think they just try to be like cognizant of guys, kind of ramping up, getting some rest and recovery before, they hit that bout of intensity. So, but I would love to see what that looks like and if that has a drastic change in a positive manner for the NBA.
Yeah, we basically lost the game that we did that on the one day we did it on. Never did it again. You know how baseball is. If something
Right.
doesn't work that day, it doesn't actually work.
Right.
Um, yeah, we were almost doing the opposite. Like we were trying to do what you guys do. Like get up, like guys are up early anyways. Get up early, give them breakfast, let them go hit, come back, rest, go back to the field. And like I said, we did it one day. It didn't work, and that was the end of it. But
Right.
it was just so against what baseball has always done and what baseball probably always will do that
Right.
it
Right.
was just so out of the ordinary, and it was everybody's
Right.
like, what is going on here? And we're like, we're going to try something different, who cares?
Right.
um how is the game schedule? So obviously baseball you play every day, right? Like you
Right.
guys have some back-to-backs, you have some days off, but I feel like you're probably not in a city as long. Is that true,
No,
false, or
very
like what's
true.
that look like?
Very true. You could be in 4 cities in 5 days. It's very up and down. Very, like I said before, it's very intermittent and undulating. Like, you go play a game, you could have gaps in between games. You can go back to back, like you're mentioning, or you can have a game and not have a game for, 3 or 4 days. So it's very like undulating, and that's where, it gets a little bit tricky with like ensuring like programming intensities, workload volumes are where they should be to try to like keep everything as even as possible so that there's no, peaks and troughs that are going to get guys in trouble in terms of, injuries and things like that. So, I like to call it like it's like a circus. So like you're kind of dropping off, play the game, pick up, off to the next city, right? So yeah, there's a lot of undulation that goes on there, man.
Yeah, I mean, in baseball, obviously you're traveling a lot and you're playing a lot of games, but it feels like even if you go to a city for 3 games, you can kind of set up shop on that first day, get your feet under you. The second day, you have a normal day. Third
Right.
day, you can still get your work in. You kind of pack up during the game and then you're on your way. Where at least from a 30,000 foot view of looking at the schedule for the NBA, it's like, oh, they're in this East Coast city and then they go down to the bottom of the East Coast and then, oh, wait, now they're on the West Coast. Oh, actually, they're going back to the Central time zone. Oh, not, like it just feels like it's a little bit all over.
Right.
Do they have like adequate facilities at every arena? Like obviously in baseball, you have an away
Right.
weight room at every stadium. Do they have that in the NBA, or is that not a thing?
So if I said weight room, like an actual weight room, it'd be a stretch.
Mm-hmm.
Some teams do a nice job of providing, adequate actual weight room spaces. But there's a lot of teams out there that are still trying to create an actual weight room space. So a lot of work is done in the hallways. So unlike baseball, where most teams you go to, there's an actual room that's dedicated, to you know functional training, whatever it may be. Whereas the NBA, sometimes you gotta make your own weight room in the hallway. So those are some of the challenges that present itself in the NBA is just trying to get creative and, like we talked about before, just adapt, improvise, and overcome the situation often. So. But I think there's a lot of initiatives in place. Like, when you go to the combine, I think everybody kind of sits in that round table, style, and they kind of address each organization's weight room. So I think, the NBSCA is doing a really nice job of trying to hold people accountable to creating, optimal space for everybody to try to level the playing ground. Because, as we know, like, there's nothing worse than showing up, to a facility and not having, specifics that you need to make sure your guys, have, the best opportunity to succeed. So I do think the NBSEA is doing a nice job of trying to, put some protocols in place and hold, each organization accountable to providing, certain standard level of care.
That was our problem at Fenway. I mean, I'm sure you've been in that
Yeah, yeah, got you.
weight room over there. That visiting side was not great for a long time, but it's probably making programming a little bit more of a logistical nightmare for you. So are you traveling with more equipment than you normally would, like when you were in baseball, or do you still have kind of your set go-to for a travel trunk, or you're not even allowed to bring one?
No, we bring one. We
Okay.
bring force plates. We bring like a travel bag that has, all the necessities, given we don't have, a true functional space. Like I said, like we set it up to where if we need to adapt, we can adapt and get guys what they need on a nightly basis. So, the cool thing is, the league wide, they kind of send out like, here's what each space looks like. Here's what you will have or you won't have. So plan and prepare accordingly. So before you go on a road trip, you know where you're headed. You got a picture, a video of we try to take pictures and videos of the hotel spaces as well, because sometimes it's just best to get guys through the hotel gyms rather than doing it at the arenas, because there's really nothing at the arena. Um, so yeah, man, we try to travel with everything we can. I know a lot of people travel with their 1080s. We didn't do that a ton last year, but I think, now that everybody's becoming more comfortable with it, players are becoming more comfortable with it. I think that'll be something that we travel with, just to make sure we have another tool, in the toolbox to get guys ready and prepared for the game.
When you're on the road and you have that gap in time, do you go back to the hotel and maybe some guys train, or do you just stay at the arena for that whole time and just like find a place to nap or something?
Nah, we go back because treatments are set up at the hotels, like treatment spaces are set up at the hotels. So guys go back, get their treatment. Some guys come back, lift. So yeah, we definitely retreat back to the hotel spaces, and then oftentimes that's kind of your time to catch up with the family. Go to lunch. With the staff member. Grab a coffee, catch up. Take care of anything personal you need to do in that gap, and then kind of be ready for departure to the arena.
When you guys travel, obviously not back to back because that's a little bit different, but let's say you play a game, you have a day or two, and then you're going on the road, or you're in a city, you have 2 days. Like, when do you travel? Obviously, like for reference in baseball, after that last game of the series, you usually travel. And then if there's an off day, like for us, if we had an off day at home, we would travel on the off day so that, like, let's say you play Sunday, you can stay at home Sunday night, and then we would travel on Monday on the off day and then play Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, versus like traveling Sunday and having an off day on the road. Like, what does the travel look like for you guys? Like, when do you try to optimize planes, or does it just not matter? You guys just go whenever?
Yeah, I think it depends. A lot of it is, the coach's preference. If they want to get to a city earlier and have like a practice day in
Mm-hmm.
between. So a lot of it just kind of depends. Like typically, like if we're coming off like back to back, they'll probably err on the side of giving guys more rest and just flying out on the off day. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
if, it was an off day prior to, travel day or something like that, we'll just travel that day, get there, set up shop, get guys kind of acclimated. But again, yeah, like if we're coming off a pretty dense schedule, they'll typically just let guys get the rest, get up, fly out in the afternoon the next day, get to the city, kind of wind down, do their thing, and then get ready for shoot around the following morning for the game. So it really just depends. A lot of it too, going West Coast to East Coast. Sometimes they try to get ahead of that, and we'll leave like right after a game just to get out there so guys can adjust and get acclimated for a day, and maybe just have like a shoot around or practice, or get guys some minutes, like the low minute groups, stuff like that. Just kind of making sure guys are staying ready. They call it a stay ready group with us. So we'll do things like that just to make sure everybody stays afloat.
Yeah, the I was always so torn on that. Like, I really didn't like traveling on the off day because I feel like I blew a complete off day. But I understand, like, I don't have kids or anything. Obviously, I still appreciate my time with my wife, but like a lot
Sure.
of the coaches wanted to stay home so that they could be with their family before a long road trip. Where I was like, I kind of just want to leave Sunday night after the game and have an off day in a different city,
Right.
and actually have the off day to myself versus like, all right, we're going to travel at like, I don't know, noon, and then we're gonna land at 2 or 3 o'clock, and then by the time we get to the hotel, it's like 4:30. Grab dinner, go to bed, and then like we're at work again. And a lot of those off days, honestly, we would practice before we got on the plane anyway. So I was like,
Right,
this
right,
isn't
right.
really an off day; it's just an excuse for you to add another practice in. But yeah, I was always so torn about it. Are you guys going east to west more frequently in the NBA as a general like general statement? Not like, obviously, in baseball there's like 2 or 3 trips into the opposite time zone and you try to bunch all those games together versus like, just go to the west coast for 3, come back, go to the west coast for 3, come back. But like,
Right.
do you feel like you're traveling time zones more frequently in the NBA? I
Just
guess it
just
would depend on the city, right?
right. So I think it just kind of depends. Like obviously, this was just my first year. So there was a lot of like when you go to the East Coast, I think they did try to kind of map it out to where it was like, you know, Boston, Brooklyn, New York, so they did try to bundle it, but there
Mm.
were times where it was like you're gonna go, to the Midwest, come back, and then eventually go back to the East Coast. So I think it just depends year to year. Just kind of like the MLB schedules, like it's kind of a roulette thing, and hopefully you just draw, the larger end of the stick. Um, because otherwise, yeah, you're going to be kind of on that like East Coast, West Coast, back to East Coast. You know what I mean? So it's very dependent. But obviously, just coming off my first season in NBA, a lot of what I saw was, you kind of went central to the east, back central and then back home type deal. So
Well, that's not terrible then.
right.
I mean, there's no way around it. Like, teams are all over the country. You're going to have to travel different time
You're
zones.
yeah, you're going
Just
to be everywhere at some point.
it just is what it is. So
Yeah,
let's talk training, if you don't mind. So just
sure, sure.
it doesn't have to be specifically like what you do, but just generally speaking,
Yeah,
now that you have some experience with basketball players, you have some experience with baseball
yeah.
players, like, do you find that there are different like cultural thoughts about lifting? And then maybe we can go from there on like, major points of emphasis and like how you
Yeah.
train differently, things like that. But just in general, like, does the weight room culture look the same in baseball versus basketball? Or are you seeing differences?
I think that kind of just goes back to kind of like my viewpoint. If people would think I'm, necessarily not necessarily crazy, but maybe they would agree. But I would say in baseball, guys guys are chasing velocity, guys are chasing strength, they're chasing power. So you're going to get a lot more like rah, high driven intensity. You're going to get a lot of that, just very X's and O's heavy, sport specific, derivatives. Like you're going to be doing things that translate to the game at a very, very high level, and very, very high intensities. But also like, doing it cognizant of what an individual needs. Basketball, because, and I think this kind of goes back to the point of like, I think, some of these guys may need less than we think because the game is so dense, it's so intense, from a biomechanical and a physiological standpoint. Like, I think that's where, the microdose approach kind of wins here just dosing guys appropriately, using like a very like daily undulating, type sequence where it's really just based on schedule, gameplay, game density, and then just an evaluation from a workload standpoint, and then just kind of dosing guys appropriately based on, those circumstances. So I would say from a cultural standpoint that I think that's where the cultural norm is like in basketball is like what do I need for the game, right? Whereas baseball is like there's a little bit of foresight of like I'm here right now. How do I get to the next level and beyond, right? Like how do I build, certain levels of strength and power, to become a major leaguer, and you have time to do it. So I think, going from minor league to major league, like though there's a timing aspect. Whereas like in basketball, there's just the G League and the NBA, and guys are just really trying to stay on court. So you really just harness like, local stimulus, building, off of deficient, buffers, within the kinetic chain. There's a lot of isometrics and eccentric work just to kind of make sure that these guys are ready for the stimulus that the court delivers. So yeah, in a nutshell, like I would say baseball, you have a little bit more to play with. You have a little bit more room to play with. Where in basketball, you just have to be really cognizant of one, like the guy's training age, who they are. And obviously, like in basketball, these guys are very, very large individuals. So just being very cognizant of addressing, guys that, could be 7 feet and weigh, 260, 270 pounds. So like it's just going to be different from that from a physiological standpoint. So you're just trying to be cognizant of all of those things, just to make sure that a guy is ready for the dosage and the stimulus that's going to be applied come game time. So yeah, man, I definitely think there are some key differences, but on the same token, it's like it goes back to just the brilliant basics, right? Like simplicity at its finest, right? Like just harnessing simple things, like just adhering to the said principle is going to drive you results. And I know I'm kind of going on a tangent here because I think this is something that I'm extremely passionate about is like, like sticking to the basics will drive, the objective outputs that we seek as performance coaches. Like if there's something that I think people can really like take from training is that like it's a lot more simple than we think it is. And I feel like a lot of people go down like all these rabbit holes and, individualized approach. Like what does that mean? That can mean something very different for each athlete. Like, but at the end of the day, when you do individualized programs, you're still harnessing the basic principles of strength conditioning. So I would say that yes, there's some differences from a strategic standpoint and how you map things out, but at the end of the day, you're still driving home the said principle.
There's two things that you brought up, and I'm really glad you did. So, in my new role at my new facility, I started working with a basketball group this summer,
Nice.
and we have some guys in high school, some in college, some that play semi-pro or pro overseas. And there's two things here. So, one, the body types and the sizes. I want to get into that and like how those are very different than baseball. And then two, I have found that if I just do basic things really well with them, they respond really nicely. Like I haven't really thrown anything fancy at them. We've just done good, solid, progressive overload strength training.
Right.
And I'm seeing pretty good results with them. And I don't know if it's, so let me say this, all of them play all the time. Like they come
Right.
to the gym, they come to the weight room gym, and they're like, we just got done at the basketball gym, and they're like dripping in sweat, they're exhausted,
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, I've just been playing. And I think that is like a culture of basketball that's ingrained from a young age, is they're just playing all the time, and they're not really taking a lot of development time in the weight room and things like that. So if you just treat them, like you said, as having kind of a younger training age and just meet them where they're at with that, the results are really, really good, at least from my limited experience this summer with the guys. And then I have another guy that I train that's a pro athlete overseas as well. And I'm wondering if that's kind of what you're seeing, like the combination of those big bodies and them wanting to play all the time and maybe not having as much emphasis on the weight room. Like if just sticking to the basics is kind of what the natural like answer to those things is, whether you were passionate about it or not, or if like you coming in with that strong belief has helped you to be successful there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, obviously, like you walk into the space and you're prepared for, like the rah-rah, like whatever
Mm-hmm.
comes at you, I'm prepared for. And what I've learned over the year, in the NBA is that like, just like you said, man, like it's very simple. They're getting a lot on the court already. So really like just taking care of like the global and local buffers throughout the kinetic chain, and you'll see really good results like just with doing a little bit less. Because they are going to get so much of a stimulus on the court. And so, I'm fortunate enough to be surrounded by extremely intelligent individuals, in the NBA that can kind of like draw this out and show like data depictions of like what this actually looks like and just how impactful simplicity can be. So, I'm very fortunate to be able to see this. Um, and it just really just harnesses back on like, I do think less is more, in the space. Um, Obviously like if there's, the organizational influence has its place, right? Like understanding like what the organization wants from an athlete, how they see this guy moving, the expectations of getting there, like what it looks like. So yeah, you do kind of have to dive into that. But again, like at the end of the day, it really just goes back to, you know, do we do a little bit more from a volume and intensity standpoint to get to that point? And then it's just like a collaboration of like what that looks like and being reflexive on one end, like being reflexive on the court for the weight room and then being reflexive in the weight room for the court, right? And it's just that collaboration and communication amongst, coaches, performance staff members, medical, like just communicating. And when you do that, I think what you'll find is that one, there's a lot of overlap in initiatives from, even from like the on-court stuff. Like, they'll do stuff that is change of direction without really calling it change of direction. And you're harnessing change of direction in the weight room. So like the communication is like, all right, well, let's omit that, and let's just work on the strength piece. He's getting the change of direction, agility, high velocity on the court. Let's just handle like the general strength. You know what I mean? And then that in itself will simplify the process for each athlete. So yeah, man.
All right, everybody, that's going to conclude part 2 of this interview with Goldy. I hope you enjoyed this one. I think it's really cool that he was able to pull the curtain back a little bit for us and talk about life, not only in the NBA, but also in the MLB, and some of the similarities and differences between the travel and the training and the athletes that he's working with at both of those high levels. So I thought that was really cool, and I'm really appreciative that he did that for us. 3 things that I took from Goldy in this part of the episode: the basic principles of strength and conditioning work regardless of who you are working with. Part of being a good coach is meeting athletes where they are at, and simplicity goes a long way with helping athletes achieve their goals. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.